I mentioned that I'm particularly interested in this topic for personal reasons, getting my own photo collection organised. But I first met Katie, I think, as we mentioned, over 10 years ago now, or about 10 years ago, when, or my first memory, strong memory at least, is when you entered your book, Dear Toby, into the Australian Photo Book of the Year Awards. And Katie will show us Dear Toby and explain more about it. But the most obvious thing to me was that it was very different to all the others because it was a very personal book. And, you know, we had other entries along the lines of photojournalism and the like. But the most interesting thing was it resonated really strongly with the judges, and it was one of the finalists. And you won a category, didn't you?
People's Choice.
You won People's Choice, and that's what fascinated me. Like, it really resonated with people. And I think we'll learn why that is the case today. But it resonated with me too, because when we started Momento, when Jeff and I started Momento, there were a number of factors that inspired us to do that. We loved traveling and taking photos. That was a big factor. But I personally also loved family history, and so did Jeff. He's just finished a family history book too. But the first book I ever produced was my dad's memoirs, helping my dad start his memoirs, copying all these photos into a book that he could write notes on. And the timing was interesting because he was actually, he ended up, he had cancer. So he was working on his memoirs, you know, as he was progressing through cancer. And it fascinated me because he was his family memory keeper. So if he didn't get to write about them, then I wouldn't have the stories and we wouldn't be able to pass them on. And watching Dad interact with those photos and those memories during like his palliative phase was amazing. I mean, he would literally come alive for a few minutes as he was like telling me stories about them and everything. So to me, that just proved the power of images and memory. So our whole premise was we wanted everybody to be able to preserve their photos. Katie, if I just touched it.
I've started off well, Libby.
But I think people kind of forget what photos mean. Like, we've been digitally obsessed with images for the last, say, decade.
Yeah.
And I think people forget what they mean, and it isn't until times where you no longer have the person in your life, but you have the photos as memories. That's when they kind of take on new meaning again. So that's why I'm interested in people getting their photos into print. And as we mentioned last week, a lot of the time it's not for us, it's actually for kids and family and people who come after us. So I could tell Katie that we shared the same interest, and that's why I think it's lovely that 10 years later, here we are and you're hosting this presentation. The last thing I wanted to mention was, oh, you just had some lovely comments in your Sunday somethings about, you know, we often don't think about when we are capturing photos, we don't think about why and how we're going to keep them. And your comment that rings true, and I think is the perfect segue for you to start, is maybe a memory isn't actually kept until it's printed. So on that note, I'm really looking forward to it. Everybody, please feel free to type into the chat window and ask questions. Oh, somebody else said their waterworks are going to. Peter.
I really should have put a box of tissues on my desk because I had a feeling that I might do it.
Can I make one more comment then? The second book I produced was for my identical twin sister on our 30th birthday, which was a fascinating process for me as much as it was for her. And it was just a lovely experience, a lovely walk down memory lane. And, you know, to hand it over and see her response was just magic as well. The third book I did was a book for my nephew. So my first nephew, my only sister, my identical twin son. And sadly, he was born 2 days before my dad passed away. So they only had 1 hour together, and it was the most beautiful hour, and I got to capture it all in photographs and on video. And I took those photographs and I made a little book for Sam called, you know, Poppy's Pearls of Wisdom. And it was, you know, that book means so much to us all. And I suppose I just want people to think about the meaning of these memories for people. So yes, sorry, Katie. Now that
Libby.
Anyway, while Katie gets herself together, Peter, I would just like to comment that, yeah, we are recording this and I'll make it available. It'll take me a few days to get to it, but the trick is with any of these webinars, after I've got them all, I'll upload them onto the events page again. So the register now button becomes the watch now button. But what you will need to do is just log in to be able to see it. So yes, all the recordings are there. And yeah, Rachel, it's a shame about that hay fever.
If only I could use that as an excuse.
All right, well, Katie, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Libby. This is such a pleasure to talk about this. And as Libby has said, it's really apt because right now we're in a phase of a lot of us having a lot of free time. And I would rather use that free time doing something special for my family and my future than mindlessly scrolling Facebook and watching Netflix, which I'm doing as well. But it sort of dawned on me partway through this period of more time that I could be using it more wisely. And so I have been, and I've been on a mission to catch up on my photo books and my family photos, a process which probably started in earnest a couple of years back, but this has kind of prompted me. And it's such a beautiful topic for a webinar because I really hope that I can inspire some of you to do similar. And hopefully you're here because you already had that in mind. You know, I do want to do my photo books, but I just don't know where to start. I posted on my personal Facebook, I think it was last week sometime, just out of interest to see how many of my friends did photo books, personal photo books. And I was not surprised to see that most people said, it's just so hard and I don't know where to start and I've got too many photos and I don't have time and it's too expensive. And yeah, there were a few people who did religiously do them, either holiday books or family annuals. And that was amazing and wonderful to see. And I know there are lots of people who do this religiously. I'm a very thorough person. It's my nature to be probably more thorough. I like to use the word thorough rather than perfectionistic. It's in my nature to be extremely thorough with everything I do. And when it comes to photographs, excuse me, one of the things that I have noticed over the years as I've gone deeper into my parenthood journey, but also deeper into my photography journey, is that as your photos accumulate, you start to forget the photos that you've taken. You start to forget events. And you have this thought of, oh my God, I really need to put whatever it might be on the wall. Jeremy and myself had a holiday to Iceland in 2015, just 5 years ago. And it was the best holiday of my entire life, without question. And Iceland is my favourite country in the whole world, and I've travelled a lot. And we still don't have a photo book or any photos on our wall from that trip. What we did do was we made a little calendar, which we've been rotating for years on our fridge, even though it's like year relevant. It's just, we just can't bear to part with the photos. So we made a series, and we also both entered a series into the awards. So we got as far as like a collection each of about 12 favourite photos. But you can imagine spending 3 weeks in a country like Iceland, 2 photographers with full gear, how many photos we actually took. And not just beautiful epic landscapes or photos to enter into awards, but photos of us being crazy, being silly, you know, standing under waterfalls, eating eggs and bacon at our freezing cold campsite, you know, cleaning like 2 weeks worth of cake dirt off our rental van. Just so many little moments captured on iPhone, captured on Hasselblad, captured on our Nikons. Just so many, like thousands and thousands of photos. And it always seemed like just too big and too hard to know where to even start. And just over the last few months, we've brought it up about 5 times. And we've decided what we want to do, but we just haven't done it yet. And I've actually been leaving it a little bit aside because it is hard. It's probably the biggest collection of photographs that I've got from one event. And we've decided we're going to put 3 canvases on the wall, framed canvases, but we have no idea how to choose the photos. And just getting back to what I just said, there are so many moments in a trip, and that's just 3 weeks of someone's year, let alone their life. And I feel like with everything we do that we document, we have the beautiful big moments, and then we've got the little moments. And we can't put them all on our walls. We can't print them all and stick them in frames to put on our desks. We just can't do it. In my mind, the only way of really truly preserving all of the moments is in a book, because a book can contain hundreds of photographs, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be wall-worthy moments. It can be out of focus moments. It can be shittily exposed iPhone selfies. It can be anything that you want. They have a place in a book, and a book can be designed and put together in such a way that you can allow the beautiful moments and the hero shots to really sing, but still have all of those other moments. So that was my big, long, rambling introduction, which has nothing to do with what's written on my notes here. I had a feeling that this webinar was going to be very fly by the seat of my pants, because I feel like it's a topic that I could talk about till the cows come home. I need Libby to rein me in a little bit here and there, because I'm going to ramble. But hopefully everything I say is useful and helpful and of value to everybody who's listening. So a little bit of background on me. I am a very sentimental person. I'm a collector of things, and I keep stupid things, embarrassing things. I have boxes of things, which I've been keeping since I was probably 12, maybe, which is also around the same age that I started writing a diary. And unlike many adults, I have never destroyed my diaries. I wouldn't show them to anybody, but I couldn't bear to destroy or chuck out all of those beautiful memories, because they're part of what makes me me. They're my history, and they're who I am. And even though I might have been the dorkiest, weirdest 12-year-old, it's still what's brought me to who I am today. So all of those little things, whether they're ticket stubs from my favourite movies, which are probably all faded, or whether they're, you know, my favourite keyring that I had when I was backpacking around Europe, or, you know, some rocks that I collected from somewhere, God knows where, or a feather, or, you know, whatever it might be, I just can't help but keep these things because they conjure up memories. And when I became a photographer, some of the need to collect objects diminished a little bit, because the photographs started to fill in the gaps, and I was able to capture more than just faces. It was, you know, scenery, it was detail, it was feelings and emotions and things like that. So photographs really sort of became my means to preserve. And I think I'm a little bit obsessed with memories in general. My favourite movie of all time is Boyhood. Not sure how many of you have seen it, but if you haven't and you like the idea of family history and memories, watch it, because it's just extraordinary. And one of the concepts that that movie gave me when I first saw it, which incidentally I saw on an amazing trip that I had with Jeremy to New York in 2014. I saw it during that trip. So I was part of a whole experience, and going to the movie somewhere in East Village, I think. We went to see a midnight screening, and that in itself was an awesome memory. The film is very much about how, as you grow older and you look back on your life, your understanding of your memories changes, because you play them out in your head with the knowledge that you are at the time that you're playing them. Mm-hmm. So they change over time, and it's a really bizarre concept. It's hard to get your head around. And of course, as you change, it's really hard to remember how you remembered the memory from the last time that you relived it. So, and I suppose everybody's probably had the feeling of thinking, do I remember that thing that happened when I was 2 because I remember it, or because I have a photograph of it? I've certainly had that a lot of times. I actually don't have the best memory from much that happened below the age of about 10. I think genetically people have different dispositions to actually having strong memories. And I know that mine aren't great. And I've certainly met people over the course of my life who've remembered vivid things from when they were quite little. I have memories from very specific events in my life, sort of maybe around 5 or 6, because they were different to normal life, like when we lived in England for a little while. I remember things from that, but that's just sort of a random selection of memories from this particular age. But then a lot of the things I don't remember, and maybe that's partly why I'm so obsessed with memories, because I feel like I'm going to lose them, and I have lost them. Like I went to a high school reunion at one point, and there were people there that I didn't remember, and I'm like, what has happened? Why don't I remember this? I mean, there's so much stuff in our brains all the time, we can't remember everything. And I feel like everything that we go through is worth remembering, no matter how shit it is, because it's part of how we find our place in life and become ourselves and understand ourselves. So this is like really philosophical for me. It's connected to how I exist as a human. And I think that's where all of this obsession over, family records and history comes from for me. And I know a lot of photographers can relate to this, because I've had these conversations with photographers before, and they've gone, yeah, that's the same, I'm the same. And so that's why I want to share these things, and I want to share it from like a really heart-centered place, because that's where it kind of comes from. And I feel like you can't sit down and do all this stuff if you're not coming at it from the right place. Otherwise it feels like a chore. It's like editing a wedding, or lots of weddings. It's like, my family photo hard drive is a little bit like a backlog of a whole season worth of weddings that I haven't caught up on. But it's not, because when I look through them, it conjures all these beautiful memories.
Katie, I just want to pick up on 2 things you said then, which was, you forget memories or people or things that have happened, and, photos inspire you to remember those memories. And that's my concern, and one of the biggest things that I try to communicate mainly to our consumer customers more than our professional photography customers, because I hope they feel that anyway, as you're proving. But you need to, what happens when the digital files are gone too? Like, how many of us who are sitting in on this webinar here have lost photos off our hard drive, or lost a CD-ROM that we thought we'd stored all of our photos on. I mean, once they're gone, they're gone. And once again, I feel for the children and the grandchildren who never get to really understand their families because they don't see photos. And you said that photos and memories are so important to you. One point we touched on in your previous webinar was how children, when they see photos of themselves or images of themselves and themselves with their family, that's when their sense of identity and belonging really is strengthened. So there are, very genuine, real reasons why preserving photos are important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me back to that point of, what's the point of taking the photo if you're not going to keep it? And when you keep it, how do you keep it? Yeah. So if you had the thought every time you press the shutter, what am I going to do with this photo? Like, what would the answer be? So for me, I never think that. I just press the shutter because I'm compelled to record whatever that is, something that's moved me or something that I want to remember. But if I ask myself that honest question and I answered honestly, the answer would have to be, I'm just going to put this on my hard drive with the rest of the 180,000 photos that I have on my hard drive. And that's shit. Like, that's not why we're photographers, and that's not why we preserve these memories. That's not our motivation in our hearts when we press the shutter. But that's the reality of what most of us are doing. And the more we do it, the harder it gets to do something about it, because it just keeps accumulating.
But how do we start?
How do we start? Well, I'm going to share a lot of stuff with you that I hope is going to give people ideas and inspiration. But I'm also going to go through some practical stuff as well, because I think that is what a lot of people need. But more than anything, I think sometimes you just need a reason. and hopefully this webinar is the reason. You know, there's always a linchpin or a turning point that changes things in people's lives, and hopefully for people who are watching who want to do this, it's just this, you know, whether you take my ideas and make something of them for yourself, or whether you use my techniques, it doesn't matter. Sometimes you just need the trigger. So, and even for those people who couldn't make it and they registered, you know, and they listened to it later. Because I had quite a few friends who said, I really want to watch it, but I've got to work or whatever it might be.
And that includes your mum. She can't get in.
That's my mum.
Later, okay?
She's going to be so embarrassed when she hears.
Sorry.
So I'm just looking over my notes now because I've just gone like all over the place, which is great. I'm happy I've done that. And my throat's like, I don't know why, but it's really annoying.
You just have a sip.
Apologies for the croakiness. So why I love books so much is that books are tactile, and touching things stimulates your mind, and it stimulates memory, because memories can be so sensory. And I think I've read somewhere many times that sensory memories are the strongest, like the smell memories or the touch memories. They can be like extremely strong, and they can sort of take you, they almost transport you to another place. And I think having a book and looking through memories is just going to make it so much more powerful that those things can happen, because you're touching something while you're looking at something, and then stimulating not only your imagination but your feelings as well. So that's really the main reason why I love books. And I think I've always loved them because I've grown up in a house full of books. My parents' house literally has every square inch of wall is taken up by either paintings or books. And that's just what I've always known. So I've always seen them as valuable because that's what my parents saw as valuable. So I was trying to, when I was writing my Sunday somethings, I was trying to think of this analogy of, you know, what's your legacy? Your legacy is your photographs. But if you don't print them, then your legacy is pretty much going to be a box of hard drives. And like Libby said, they might die, they might not go the distance, and when they get passed on to your kids, are they going to know the value of those things? Like they might, because they might know you as a photographer. They might not, because it might just be too much, and they might not know how to access those memories. So for me, I'd rather have a huge bookshelf full of printed books, because there's no chance that they are not going to know the value of those, and they're probably going to be passed down from your children's children and onwards. And a really well printed book can last for generations and generations, provided you don't let your 2-year-old touch them. Although I have to say, so far, no book damage. Near misses, but no actual damage.
Nice work.
And I kind of also like the analogy of life being like books. You know, volumes, chapters, epilogues, prologues, punctuation. You know, photographs can be like that. And I like also the idea of, there are some chapters of our lives that we actually don't want to remember. They might be, you know, times that tragedies happened, or just hard times. It could be anything. And that doesn't mean they should be erased. We might not be able to look at them now, but we might be able to look at them in 10 years' time, and they all deserve a place. And that's the same with books, I guess. You know, I see this perfect parallel. It's like photos were made to be in books. That's just the way they should be. So
it should be no surprise to people to learn that not only Katie a graphic designer, but she also was a bookbinder for a while.
I did, yeah. I did bookbinding. I started it in high school, actually. I did it. I made paper and a series of books as for my final HSC Year 12 art project. And that's where I learned bookbinding. I taught myself a lot of different techniques, and the thing of making books from scratch, I guess, became, you know, really, it was special. And, you know, I did it for a project, but obviously came out of Year 12 with this awesome skill. And then I went on to sort of use that a couple of years later in a sort of slightly entrepreneurial way, to make sketchbooks and portfolio boxes for artists in Sydney for a period of time, which was great. And that gave me a lot of a lot of love for books from a different point of view, like the actual making of them. And I've also made my dad, who is an artist, a number of books that he keeps his drawings in over the years. So they will also become a legacy one day, you know, that's his life's work as a drawer and painter. And they're all made by hand by his daughter. And I think that's so special, so special. It's as special as what you were just talking about with those moments of your life, Libby, you know, that you've managed to get into books that are just so precious and made me cry just thinking about them, let alone seeing them. So, yeah. So so there's a couple of aspects to this talk, and one of them is obviously personal projects, which may not be family memories. And the other one is your family memories and travel and just preserving the moments of your personal history. So there's two elements there, and I've done a little bit of both. So I want to sort of go through a bit of that. And personal projects is something a lot of photographers talk about. So I'm not going to go into like a huge, you know, in-depth conversation about that, but we all know how valuable they are because we've heard so many people tell us over the years. For me personally, I feel like you don't need to take a class or a workshop to extend yourself as a photographer. Sometimes it's as simple as setting yourself up a little assignment, like a school assignment, but something that you really want to do that can push you in a direction that maybe you need pushing. And the thing about personal projects and artistic growth is that it's a lot easier to push the boundaries and put yourself into uncomfortable places when you're doing it on your own time, you know, for you, than it is to do it, you know, in the public eye or outside of your own space. So, and that's what I do with my personal projects. They're all very close to me, and I don't necessarily show them all as well. And sometimes amazing things can come out of them that you don't expect, you know, and usually it's about having pushed yourself in a certain direction. But one of the things that is really important about a project, a personal project, is that you need to do something with it at the end. So my more successful ones have been where I've conceived the end result, i.e. a book, and actually gotten on with it. So, and then the other thing about personal projects too is that they can actually feed into your work. They can inspire your work. Sometimes working on something outside of your business or your everyday photography work can sort of start to infiltrate into your work and give you a lot of extra inspiration, and that can inspire new ideas within your business, which is really great. And that's happened to me many times over the years. And there have been times when I've been way too busy to do personal projects, but that doesn't mean I wasn't taking personal photos. I just wasn't focusing on a particular thing. So I'm going to go through a few personal projects that I've done, and then some of those things will feed into the family stuff as well. So where I started with personal projects was I think it was the very first year that I started moving towards becoming a family portrait photographer. I was involved in a group on Flickr with lots of other photographers, a group that's, you know, eventually moved to Facebook, and we're all actually still in contact with each other. So we're going back probably, I'm going to say 12 years roughly. And we started doing this photo a day project, and it would only happen in summer because that's the time that most mothers, and we were mostly mothers, would be home with their kids for a period of time, and their kids home too, to be able to take a photo every day. And the idea was that it wasn't supposed to be hard. You know, it was just let's go out every day and record something, take a photo. We take lots of photos, but one photo. And that photo will represent that day. And then at the end of that month, you would have a beautiful compilation of summer photos about your family. And if that was all you did all year because you were so busy, at least you had that 1 month. And so that's where I started. And it was amazing because I was only in the early days of photography, and it forced me to do something every day. So I had to get my camera out to try different things. I didn't want to take the same photo every day. And so I did that for a number of years, and it got to, so the summer of 2011-12, that year, I'm not sure why that particular summer was significant, but it marked a point in my journey, obviously for me, where I was ready to push myself just that little bit further. And this is probably as a photographer, but also I was finding my feet as a storyteller. So I decided that year that I would not follow the format that I'd followed this whole time, which was we start on the 1st of January and we finish on the 31st of January, that I would start when my holidays started, which was generally around the 21st of December. And I would go for as many days as I could go for. I didn't set myself a time. I think I thought maybe I'll do 30, and then I thought, no, I'll do 40. And I think I did 50. Anyway, I'll pull it out and I'll show you. So what I did was I set myself some parameters, because what I was noticing that was happening before is that I was taking these photos. I was taking too many photos. Sometimes I would pick a photo to share on my group or on my Facebook eventually. And then I would never process the rest of the photos. And I never put them into a book. And I would be frustratedly thinking about it for months afterwards, and I just never get around to it. So this year I went, okay, I'm going to design my book template first. This has to be a book. This is going to be a book for Toby. At the time he was 4 and he was my only child, and it was going to be a book for him, and that's what I was going to create. So I called it Dear Toby, and I set myself a task of it being square format. I was going to write something every single day to go with the photo, and it was going to be to him, like a letter. Sometimes it would be long, sometimes it would be short. And the setting of those parameters made the whole thing really real. I wasn't just taking a photo a day. I was creating a legacy book that would be his, and it gave the project a whole extra sort of layer of significance. And I had to do it. I had to stick with it. So one of the things about personal projects being successful, I think, for me, and maybe for lots of photographers, is rules and accountability. So once you start, you can't stop because you've got a template and it's going straight in there. So when I finished the book, when I finished the photos, I just tweaked the book and sent it off to print. So this is the book. It's a beautiful cotton rag section sewn book from Memento. I hope that you can see a little bit. This is the inscription. It says, inspired by love for everyday moments, summer holidays, stories, family, and above all else, my love for you. And then it starts, and it's like a photo and a little letter. And like many of the photo a day projects, it's got the time and the date on every single page. And I'll show you a few of my favourite ones. This year just pushed me as a photographer, as a documentary photographer and a family documentary photographer. It pushed me further than anything I'd done before. And as a result, I feel like it's my best personal work that I've ever done. Still, this is Toby with his little friend Saskia. This is my best girlfriend's oldest daughter. She's a year younger than him. And Toby is now about to turn 13 and Saskia has just turned 12. And they've been adoring of each other, since they were babies. And he used to call her Saxia. So cute. But, now they're on TikTok and they're twins and they're just so dorky together, and it's just, but like that photo, oh my God.
Did Toby used to sit and read this book a lot?
He did it at first. He's a little bit embarrassed by it now, and he'll come back to it.
Yeah.
This is this is probably one of my favourite photos I've ever taken of him. And the thing is, like, the photo on its own, well, it says something, especially if you know who G.I. Joe is or you've seen one of those dolls before, but the words that go with it. So another thing about books that I love is that they don't have to just have photos in them. And I am a bit of a writer and I love the power of words. And you don't even have to be a great writer to do this.
While you're doing that, I'll just flick through some pages if you want while you're talking.
So go for it. I'm going to just read you this because I love this. And this is the power of words and stories together. Today we went to Gran's house for her 80th birthday. While we were sitting around inside, your dad went rummaging in the garage and came back with his old G.I. Joe doll, complete with several outfits. He put him on the kitchen table to await your discovery. I've never seen you take to any toy the way you took to G.I. Joe. It was love at first sight. You were completely captivated and became lost in a little world of your own, just you and Joe. You flew him through the air, made him play the piano in the nude, danced with him, lay on the floor gazing at him,
Yeah.
dressed him and undressed him, and had long conversations about the meaning of life. And then tragedy struck. Your dad and I were sitting on the lounge when you came in with an alarmed look on your face. You held G.I. Joe's head in one hand and his body in the other. Your dad tried to pop his head back on, but then his entire body fell into pieces. You were devastated. Unfortunately, G.I. Joe's anatomy is beyond your dad's and my skill set, but we've promised to take him to the doll hospital. So hopefully you'll be reunited soon. It's just such a perfect little anecdote. It's something that Toby will never remember. There's no way he's going to remember that. He doesn't have G.I. Joe anymore. I don't know what happened to G.I. Joe. We got him fixed, but I don't know where he is now. And that memory is going to not only tell Toby a little bit about who he was at 4, but it's also going to tell him a little bit about who we were, who I am, my sense of humour and our history. And I just think that's so special and important. And this book has a whole summer's 50 days. I'm pretty sure it was 50 days in the end. Yeah, 50 days. And it actually finishes with a particularly poignant photo. I always like to finish these with something holistic, I guess, a broader picture. So later in this year, Toby's dad and myself broke up. And this is probably one of the only photos we've got like this. It's on the back of our little house that we lived in. I'm weeding or tending to the tomato garden. Toby's eating an ice block and his dad's doing the remote control for me to take the last photo. And it's so perfect. Like it, we had a pretty messy divorce. I know a lot of people go through that. And I didn't really want to look at these memories for a while, but now this is so powerful, so powerful. This is like 8 years on and life's different and we're good mates and Toby has, a great relationship with both of us. But it's all captured here in this book. And who would have thought that summer could be so significant? And the thing is, the summer's not that significant because big things happen all the time and so do small things. It's just that it was captured like this. And so this will form part of Toby's childhood memories, like in a much more powerful way than anything that's not printed, anything that's just in his head that could be rewritten a million times. So yeah, this book. So I just treasure and love this. And then what happened was, as a single mother, I stopped doing the project because I didn't have my son with me all the time. I didn't have 30 days, or I certainly didn't have 50 days. I didn't even have 30 days. We did 50-50 care, and the most I would have over summer was 2 weeks. And I just couldn't bear it. I couldn't, because for me, the project was about my relationship with my child. It was about parenting and family. And without him, I couldn't take photos of me. It just didn't make sense to me. So I stopped doing it. I did other things, and I'll talk a little bit about those. But 2 years ago, I started again. And now I have a new format. And I have another child too. So that was a big part of it. But for years, I was kind of cursing myself for not doing it. And I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So I started again. This year was 18-19, and I've just recently finished the 19-21, which is from last year. So it's more of a thought out format now. I've really kind of considered exactly how it's going to be going forwards, and it's going to be the same every year. They're all black and white. I'm going to print them the same, so they'll sit on the shelf together.
And speaking of printing, Katie, there's a few questions here about what papers you're using and whether you chose inkjet or indigo.
Inkjet, cotton rag, section sewn, all the way, baby.
Katie was truly our first major advocate for inkjet and cotton rag.
Look at that. I mean, it's unparalleled. You can't get that anywhere else. Only Memento. This is not a sales pitch. This is true.
And if you are thinking of it as a legacy book, a keepsake book, an heirloom, then yes, inkjet printing and cotton rag, which we also spray with an archival spray, will give you the longest lifespan possible. Yes, you will pay more for it though.
I was thinking about this in the shower yesterday, and where I have all of my thoughts.
Great thoughts.
I have such a nice shower head in my new house. It's so good. I think it helps. It really helps. It's one of those big rainwater ones. Anyway, I was thinking about this in the shower, and I was thinking it's like, how anyone who's a wedding photographer or knows much about wedding photography, clients who say, I'm just looking for a cheap wedding photographer because I'm spending so much money on my wedding. And I mean, most wedding photographers are like, that's ridiculous. Like, you should spend more money on your photography because that's the only thing you get to keep. I mean, that's just logical, right? So I'm not advocating this will probably cost about $700 at the time. I am not saying that you should spend $700 on all of your photo books. There are other options that do not cost that much. It's not practical that most of us can do that, but definitely for some of them, for some of the special ones, you can. And the other thing is, when you think about the money that you're spending on, say, a family holiday, well, I don't know about you guys. I think we're fairly normal, but if we go on a 3-week family holiday, we spend about $15,000. That's everything. That's, flights and insurance and food and all the things. $15,000 on a holiday that you want to remember, because most people want to remember their holidays more than anything. What's spending $1,000 when you get home on a book? It's a 15th of that. I just have this, I've got this thing about money, and I have things I don't spend a lot of money on and things I do. And there are some things I feel like you should spend money on, and memories is one of them. And I went through I'll talk a little bit about this in planning as well, the wrestling, but how much is it all going to cost? When it adds up together, it's a lot, and can I afford that? And I'll talk a bit about how you can balance that out. But it is worth spending money on these things because they are going to be kept forever. And if you print your books at, shitty places, which I'm not going to name, they won't last. They'll fall apart and they'll discolour, and no one's going to be looking at them in 100 years.
You can join the marketing team, Katie.
This one is not printed on fine art cotton rag. This one is printed on eggshell, and it's still section sewn, and it's with the indigo, and it's still beautiful. It's not as beautiful, but only I know the difference because I've done both. If someone picked this up and hadn't seen anything else, they would be well impressed with the print quality. And so this book, I think, costs about maybe $250 to $300. I can't remember exactly.
That must have a lot of pages in it too, then. Yeah. It
depends on the number of pages, obviously. This one, so what I went to with my format is 40 days. So 40 days from the 21st of December to whatever 40 days is.
I won't do the maths.
29th of January. Finishing this one with a beautiful family portrait, obviously with the self-timer. But it's the same idea. And what I've done now is I've actually written this book to everybody. So there are some pages that are written to Jeremy. There are some pages that are written to Augie. And there are some pages that are written to Toby. But they're all written in the, I'm trying to think of what the English tense is, where you're talking directly to somebody. Some of them are long, some of them are short. But they're all landscape, black and white, because landscape's how I always shoot. There's no point trying to force myself, really. And I decided to make them black and white because I just want the books to be uniform. So that's where it's...
Also has that kind of, it's evocative from a memory perspective. I don't know. I feel black and white is more dramatic, more emotional. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it pulls you into the moment and there's nothing else to distract you from. And a lot of times I think when you're documenting such a variety of memories, it can be the colours and the light can be very, like, all over the shop, from, beach scenes to, dark rooms to nighttime. And so making them black and white made it uniform, which I guess is just part of my thorough approach to things. But I like that. So, so where was I? Okay. The things that all my projects have in common is there's a few things. One of them is that I make myself accountable by doing some sort of share. So I know once I've started, I can't stop. And that's usually on my social media. It's definitely not a compulsory thing, but I like sharing it. It helps my business identity as well as just being accountable to something, because I can't stand the thought of giving up. And there was one time I did a project I didn't share, and I did stop the project. And it's actually the only time I've ever done that. And it's incredibly disappointing for me to think about it now. And I'm going to come across it as I go through my family annual project, and it's going to make me really cross. So the thing about giving up on a project is that at the time you might go, oh, this is just the best thing for me right now. Like, I just can't continue. But I guarantee you, when you look back on it, you're going to feel differently. It's kind of like when you look at a photo of yourself and you go, oh, I look so old or so fat or whatever it is. And then 10 years later, you look at it and you're like, oh my God, I looked amazing, because you're looking at it with a totally different context. So you've got to honour these things. If you start something, finish it. And that's kind of, I guess, I like to keep accountable, because I don't want to have that feeling later of regret. Because the regret, I won't remember the reason that I stopped, other than I was busy. I won't remember that it was, I don't actually know why I stopped that project. I honestly have no idea why I stopped it. There would have been a reason, and I would have justified it to myself in order that I didn't feel too guilty at the time, but it's obviously totally irrelevant now. It's about 5 years ago. So the other thing they have in common is that I always set up a parameter for myself, a format and a style. And I'm going to talk about planning soon as well. And this is part of my planning. I don't like starting things unless I've got a plan, because that's how you make uninformed decisions, which later you might regret. Like, the format of this is really important to me, and I don't want to in 3 years' time go, oh, I should have done it in square or whatever. I just want to be confident that I've made the right decision. I've considered it carefully. And then the other thing that all my projects have in common is that I always have words included, because I feel that just fleshes out the story so much more. So a good one to go to now would be this massive, fat, chunky beast.
Ooh.
So this one is, it's called 52, obviously.
Salt and pepper linen.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which I like. I love that fleck. This one is also very expensive. But this is a one-off too. So this is a book that I did for August's first year. Yeah. Because the fact is that I'm probably not going to do another one of those for my second child, because I now have 2 children. So this is Toby's and this one's for Augie. And this is 52, a photo essay for August and our future selves. What did I write here? Let's just see. These pages tell the story of a year of life. They hold events, feelings, holidays, relationships, and milestones. They reveal tiny details that would normally be forgotten. Favourite toys, clothing, objects, habits, settings, phrases, and jokes. This book perfectly encapsulates the reason I became a photographer in the first place. It's a vault of nostalgia that will grow more poignant with time, put together in a way that only words and pictures on paper can be. Beautiful. And it starts with my beautiful second child in his first week of life. And every single photo I took from above, and it's each week for 52 weeks of his life.
Oh, so cute.
Oh, God, I love babies. This was his shitting himself phase. It's full of humour. It's not all sentimental. I am a very sentimental person, but I also have a pretty wicked sense of humour. He just shat through his clothes a lot. And I wanted him to remember that.
You'll never forget it.
Never forget it. But it's also about me and us. And like, this is the AIPP week. He was 7 weeks old, and we did the state awards, and he came along and he was in a one of those, crazy baby wrap things on my chest while I was judging. And so it's not just about him. It gives him context, his life, and this is one of my favourite ones, all his toys. And the thing about objects too is, like, I was talking before about keeping objects. Sometimes you can just photograph them and make sure they're kept that way. It's so much easier. Same with children's artwork. putting it into a book rather than having these bloody boxes of shit everywhere. This one's really cool because it's got a lot of hand-me-downs from Toby, as well as lots of Augie's stuff. And I will remember where all these came from. And he's not going to, obviously. He might keep a few of them, maybe a few books. But he'll probably have a weird sensory link with some of them because they will have been held onto for longer for whatever reason. So I had a lot of fun doing this. It was a lot of work and I was really committed. And there were weeks where I just didn't want to do it. I went back to work very early. And, you know, sometimes it was hard, but I'm so glad I got to the end. This week I forgot to put the number in. I was so pissed off at myself, but I just couldn't bear to do it again. So every single week I had the number in there somewhere.
Oh, right, yep.
And, you know, obviously some weeks I had a little more time on my hands. Other weeks I didn't. But it includes our holidays. Like this one was done on a holiday. That was done on a holiday. So it includes lots of things.
And how agreeable was August to this process?
Oh, he was, to begin with, he was great. But actually, even the ones where he looks like he's asleep, he wasn't really asleep.
Right.
So he probably wasn't that agreeable, but you know, he went along with it. As he got older, I just adapted. I thought the from above thing would always work because you can photograph anything from above. So it wasn't forcing him into doing something. I did think it through. I've had a child before, so I thought it through. I went, hang on, when he gets close to 1, he's going to be crawling, and so he's sitting in this one. These are all our books.
And Katie, I just got so distracted with the book pages there that you keep flicking, but I was just going to say you've got some lovely comments here. You might like the feedback. It's adorable. I feel I need to have another baby.
Oh,
to do a book.
I recommend it.
As my kids are teenagers, I don't think I could be compelled to have another baby in order to do a book. A puppy, on the other hand, and an amazingly beautiful memory book. Great idea. I agree.
Thank you. This is the last page. That was his birthday. Lots of really significant things happened during the year. Some of them not so pleasant, and I managed to get them all in there. And that's really important. I think there are ways that you can include those things without them being... I got to actually 2 other really good examples of that. Sometimes a project can be interrupted by something that you didn't expect. And yeah, I've always managed to incorporate it. So this Days of Summer, August had a terrible accident partway through this. And so for 5 days, we were in hospital, and it was probably one of the most traumatic events of my parenting life. And I didn't write, but we continued to take photographs. We had a camera on us, and I would anyway, like, take photographs even in those situations because it's still part of your story. But I certainly didn't think about what photographs I was going to include or anything like that. And so I wrote later. And so what I did was on those pages, where are they? Close to the beginning. Oh, I just wrote at the front, words written at a much later date, because I just wanted him to know too that this is a really big deal, what happened. And I didn't want to make it into a big dramatic thing, because this is supposed to be a book of memories, beautiful memories, but it's also real life. And this year, over the 1920 summer, was the bushfires. And I spent most of that period in a heightened state of anxiety. And I actually used some of that time when we were trapped inside. We weren't able to go outside because Canberra had the worst air quality in the world. I used some of that time to get into some books. That was when I actually put a few through, because it actually was a way of dealing with anxiety for me. I was obsessively checking my phone like hundreds of times a day. It was really bad. And I wanted to keep doing this project as well, but I was just not myself. And so I used designing some books as a way of just calming myself and keeping myself centered with something to do so that I wasn't lost in my head. And so for the book this year, I did write every day. I tried not to dwell too much on the hard part of it, but I made sure I talked about it, because my kids are not going to remember. August definitely won't remember. Toby will maybe remember it, but they're not going to remember it like we will. it's important to acknowledge that it wasn't great for us, that it was hard, as part of their memory books, you know, as part of those sensory things, because there's a good chance that they'll remember something, but maybe not, you know, in the way that we would. And so that's all there too, but it's done in a subtle way, because I always remember who I'm making the book for, which is for them, not for myself.
And
so.
Katie, on that note of writing, and, you know, it sounds like the book was therapy. I suppose the writing, and especially if you're doing it on a daily basis, like with your summer books, that's almost like it's like journaling, and in a way. But is there anything you want to say? I should preface this by saying I'm a big advocate of adding text into photo books for context, for people other than yourselves who are going to look at this book without knowledge of, you know, what's been happening. But what about people, say, who aren't big on writing? Like, you're obviously you love writing. Is there any advice you have for people like who don't love writing? How important do you think? I mean, it's subjective, but is there anything you want to say about the writing? And
if you actually don't like writing, then I would just put the place and the time for context.
Yeah.
You know, at Gran's house, you could even put the suburb and the address, because obviously they wouldn't necessarily know that, like remember that. You know, I do like sometimes to be really specific about places, knowing that you might not live there, or you know, anything could happen. But if you just think that you're not a good writer but you don't dislike it, then just write. Like, no one else is going to judge you. It's not for anybody else, it's for your family. And I liken it a little bit to in my business, when mums say, I don't want to be in the photo because I'm overweight at the moment, or, you know, haven't had my roots done or whatever. I liken it to that, because your kids don't see that. They do not for a second see those faults in you. Like, they just don't. It's a bloody miracle of being a parent, if you ask me. They might see it in other people, but they don't see it in their own parents. And so they're not going to read your words and think, gee, mum wasn't a very good writer. Like, they're just going to go, look at my beautiful memory. So it doesn't matter. I just love writing. It's a really, really big part of my life. And so I will always put extra effort into that. But I've followed people's photo days for years, and some of them aren't written perfectly. It just doesn't matter. It's still a story. And it's just giving context to the photo.
Yep.
Yeah. It's just that extra something. It's like the difference between having one photo on the wall and then having a whole spread of different photos in a book. It just gives you so much more meaning and context.
And that is the beauty of the book format, that you can add things that you couldn't to prints on a wall. And yeah, my suggestion is, if you're not keen on writing, keep it to captions, keep it to facts. But if not, you know, try it, have some fun. You might surprise yourself.
Yeah. And also you can use your voice, use the voice that you would use to talk to your children. I find that mothers particularly have voice with their children that they might not think, that they might not even give themselves credit to having. And it's different to the voice that you might use to write a letter or function in your business or something like that. So use that voice and just really talk to them like you would when you're tucking them into bed at night time. Yeah. The other one that I just want to talk about quickly, which I don't have because it's being printed at the moment, is another personal project I did, which I want to talk about this one. I'll try and keep this one brief because it's something that's a little bit controversial, but I heartily recommend this. If you are looking for a personal project and you don't know what to do, and especially if you either don't have children or your children are too old to let you photograph them, I recommend this one, and it is doing self-portraits. So I did it for a year, one a week, and I did it a long time ago. I'm only just printing it now.
Yeah.
This one's really for me. I don't know if this is for my kids. I don't know. I haven't decided yet, but I did it for me, and I did it for my photography, and I also did it for myself and my mental health. I've done it in this. So I think I've done it in this format. What I did was I did it at the same time the same year as Dear Toby. So it was 2011 to 2012. I started about halfway through the year, and I started with a group of photographers. So I set up a Facebook group. I asked if anyone else wanted to be involved because accountability, again, I wanted it to be accountable. And I also thought that the sharing process might be really great for everybody, but in a closed group because it was a bit more personal. And it started off with about 80 people, and then it kind of dwindled down because it was a year. You know, it's a long time to be committed to something. And eventually, I think maybe about 20 of us might have finished off. So many amazing things came out of it for me. The process of it was I set myself aside once a week what I called an artist date with myself. And it was a period that might have been 20 minutes, half an hour, or some weeks it was 3 hours. It depended on what my photo idea was for that week. And it was literally just me and my camera and my remote control that drove me mental. But I persisted with that little bastard. And I used it as therapy. I used it as a way to reconnect with myself, to have me time. I used it as a way to explore some photographic techniques and ideas that I hadn't been able to do in my business or with my child. So it was multifaceted. And over the course of 12 months, I learnt so much stuff about photography that I didn't know. I learnt how to tell a story really well. And I learnt stuff about myself. And it was really, really great. It's not something I've ever shared publicly. I might have posted maybe a small handful of those photos out of context over the years. I don't even know how I feel about sharing the whole thing, but I just am here to tell you that it was an incredibly valuable experience, and I would recommend it to anybody. Two really cool things that came out of it professionally was that one of the photos I took was I entered into the Head-On Portrait Prize, and it was a finalist, which was freaking awesome because it's so hard to get anywhere in that competition, and I've entered so many times, and that's the only time that I've gotten anywhere. And it was a self-portrait that I did for me, and it had nothing to do with anything but me. And the other thing was I experimented with a technique that I had been fascinated with for a while, but I'd never actually had time to experiment with. And then from there, I learnt how to do that technique so well that I created a personal image that I entered into APA, and it was my very first APA Gold. And that was, again, from a personal thing, which is really special. It had nothing to do with my business or my work or anything. It was just something that came from my heart and from a sense of wanting to play and have fun with an idea that I was really inspired by. So those two things are really special because they went beyond the personal. And that's the power of what personal projects can do for you. So yeah, I really wanted to mention that. And I know a lot of people think self-portrait is like how self-indulgent. It's not. Artists have been painting and drawing themselves for literally hundreds and hundreds of years. And I just think it's a natural thing for an artist to want to do. And also, like, some of the photos are bloody great. I love them. Some of them are really embarrassing, but, you know, it was fun.
Katie, you've inspired some comments. I don't know if you're seeing them, but as Peter said, your exploration of the self-portrait is what a personal project is all about. Wonderful. Can't wait to see it. That's if she shares it, Peter. And then Courtney said self-portraits are bloody hard to do.
Yeah, they are. And you have to explore all kinds of ideas around them as well. Like, how do you capture yourself being real, you know? How do you capture your... as I put the book together the other day, because I did write with each one, you know, which is typical for me, obviously. I was reading through some of the things that I wrote, and one of them was all about how do you capture yourself at an in-between moment. And I had done this one like that, and I tried, and I did, like, I think I wrote that I took, like, you know, 40 or 50 photos before I finally got one that I thought looked actually like I was caught off guard. So you are exploring these things, and you're exploring them with yourself, but it helps you read photographs. It helps you read other people's work. So it's all just so, so valuable. And I'm looking forward to having that book actually finally in my hands, because it is really, really special for me, but it's so personal. It's just for me, you know. Yeah. I wouldn't show that around. Anyway.
So will that one actually go into a different spot, be stored in a different spot?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And all my kids call it that. Definitely not yet, anyway.
Okay. Wow. It does sound fascinating, though.
So where do we go next? I think we can talk about family stuff now and travel and...
Does anybody have any questions about what we've heard so far? Just throw them in as you please. And Katie, I've got some lined up here, so, and maybe you'll come to them at the end, but I'm interested to know, when you do have this volume and in a lot of cases overwhelming number of images, how do you start culling them down? Because you said that's your least favorite part of the process. And when people ask me how long does it take to make a book, I'm like, well, I would divide it into two parts. Selecting the photos is one very particular part of the process. Designing the book is another completely separate part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely get stuck into some practical stuff very shortly.
Yeah, sure.
I have 19,308 photos on my phone.
Oh my gosh.
That is 6 years worth of iPhone photos. So I just want to take a moment to talk about the iPhone, because I think that, or not the iPhone, the smartphone in general, people's phones taking photos. I think that it creates a way bigger problem than we already have. And I would bet my life on the fact that that's probably what's stopping a lot of people from getting into it, because they're like, but then how do I, because a lot of times your moments on your phone are just as special as your beautiful, proper camera. And for a lot of people, their phone is it. That's like your primary tool. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's great. Like, I take some amazing photos on my iPhone. I love taking photos on my phone. I love the format of it. I love the fact that I have no choice over anything other than the scene or the moment. And I do not want to lose those photos. They're so special to me, just as special as the other ones. So, you've got to get those in there with the other stuff. And so with my family memories and my travel memories, I have figured out a way to do this. I'm going to talk a bit about that. And what else? I've talked about the cost time dilemma, so I don't need to talk about that again. I'm curious as to know whether my amount of photos on my hard drive is similar to other people's. So I've got my catalogues divided into years. I'm going to show you my catalogue, or part of my catalogue, in a sec, so that you guys can get a sense of how I organise my photos. I'm not saying this is the way everyone should do it, because there are a million ways to do anything in life, but this is the way I do it, and it keeps me organised. I have 11,000 photos in my 2016 Lightroom catalogue, 9,500 in my 2017 catalogue, 11,700 in 2018, and 9,900 in 2019. And that's not including iPhone photos for most of those. So most of those photos have not even been culled, let alone edited or printed. And I know that that is the same for most photographers. So this is the problem that we need to solve. Personal projects aside.
We agree.
We do. So overwhelm seems to be one of the biggest blocks, and it has been for me too, and it's exactly why I haven't done it. Partly it's time, but the reality of time is that you spend your time doing things that you value, so you can always find time. If you value it enough, you'll find the time. And like, if you're anything like me, once I got started, I just became obsessed. Now I cannot stop. And it's beautiful. And I feel like I'm doing one of the most important jobs that I can do for my family. It's more important than feeding my family, because I can feed my family from a takeaway restaurant or, HelloFresh, but I can't. No one else can do this. This is my job. This is like, I'm creating my legacy for my future. And another thought I had this morning while I was in the shower was, you know how they say that builders, they're always living in unfinished homes? Let's not be that with photography, because a lot of us have businesses where we're actually selling printed products, and that's where we put all of our effort into. We're constantly banging on to our clients about printing stuff. the reality is that most of us aren't doing it ourselves. And yes, I've got these books, and some of these books I've had for a long time, and I've got photos all over my walls, and I make that a priority. But there's all the other stuff, and it's got to be managed and maintained. And just don't be the builder. Be the photographer that has a freaking huge shelf of photo books or boxes of photos, or however you want to do it, because then it's done, and you never have to go to that hard drive again, because looking through a hard drive is not reliving a memory, it's doing work.
Interesting. Katie, can I throw in there too that get in the photos with your children as well? So each year with our promotions, every image I use, especially in our consumer service, is always from our professional customers. I have never had to use a stock image probably since the first year. But around Mother's Day and Father's Day each year, I often go to our professional photographers who I know and say, can you send me a photo of you with your kids? And so many times they write and go, I'm really embarrassed to say, but I haven't taken one for ages. And yeah, I often think I should do that. It's like, yes, please get in the damn photos, because your kids want to see themselves with you as well.
Yeah.
I think that's very important. And just because you were commenting on, personal photos and client photos, Louise, one of our attendees, has asked, do you share your personal books with your clients to show what you can create for them, or do you keep your personal work very separate?
I share lots of personal work on my social media. No, not lots, bits here and there. And I provide a connection between my personal Instagram and my business Instagram as well. So a lot of our clients follow my personal Instagram. So I don't hide it. I don't make too much of a big deal about it. And we have photo book options for our clients that are inspired by what I do for myself. So if anyone was part of or can access later the previous webinar I talk about those. So there's definitely a connection, but I don't have them like in the studio or anything like that, because it would just take too much time away from trying to sell the products I want to sell.
Fair call.
So we've got to start with a plan when you do this stuff, okay? And I organise my photos by year. So I'm going to show you. This is pretty funny. Don't judge me. But this is how easy your plan can be, okay?
Easy is good.
So this was my first plan. That's how simple it was. It was literally me going, what did I have in all of these years? What happened? Because I made the decision I was going to backtrack to 2013, which is not that far. But that's when Jeremy and I had our first full year together as a couple. And so it seemed like a sensible time to go back to. I will tackle pre-2013 eventually, but I don't have a plan for that yet. What I wanted to look at was over the course, and so I wrote this, you can see this only goes up to 2018 because I actually did this like last year sometime. I went back and I went, okay, what happened in those years that was really significant? Like it's usually the trips, the holiday trips, or when I fell pregnant, what happened since then? What personal projects did I do? And then I tried to work out how many books I would need. So I'd need the yearbook, and then I'd need those other books too. That was my starting point. And then I started to do some of the easy ones. So I did a couple of ones that were event-based. So I did my birth photos when I had Augie, so that he's just over 2. That was 2 years ago. I had a professional birth photographer, so I did that book. And then I did the books of the professional photo shoots that we'd had. That got me on a roll. It was like, okay, good, done. That stuff's done.
So it was start easy.
Yeah, exactly. And then from there, I was like, all right, now I'm going to start tackling the bigger ones, the holidays. And so over the summer break that I was just talking about with the bushfires, I did our first proper holiday one. So that was 2016 trip to California with the 3 of us. So this is it. It was a 3-week trip. And this is what I was talking about. This trip cost us like, I don't know, at least 12 grand, maybe more. I don't remember. It was just the 3 of us. And we road tripped around California, and it was incredible. And of course I'm going to spend money on an album because, like I said, I spent the money on the trip, and this is our only way of remembering it. So I got the flush mount. So this is the sort of thing that you'd mostly use for wedding albums. And doesn't have lots of words in it, because if I did that, it would have taken me weeks. So no words, just photos and places and dates, because I really wanted to remember those
And it's
things.
kind of a different book. It's not.
It's different.
Yeah.
So it's got, oh, damn it. I wrote this down and I don't have it with me. I think it's got 380 photos in it. So this is and it's got the maximum number of pages. So here is a page of iPhone photos. It's totally different to these pages. It's come out okay. Like, it's obviously it's printed on very nice paper and everything. So it's, you know, it's top quality, but we had a family photo shoot during the trip.
Oh.
I made a separate book with all these photos, but I wanted to acknowledge it in this book. So I like the idea that you can link your books up with other things, and I'll come back to that. So this is a link. It's like saying, here's our family photos. Oh, but there's a whole book of them somewhere else. So anyway, I'm not going to flick through the entire thing, but I'll find another iPhone page. Yep. So all my iPhone pages are like that. And then every time you get to a new section with a new place, it's got that information there with the date. So you can have beautiful spreads, you know, like I love this spread. You can have beautiful spreads with amazing photographs, but you can still have all of the family moments. It's just about designing it well and choosing the photos effectively as well. I love this spread. This is one of my favorites. So, like, you know, this kind of almost feels like it should go on the wall, but it's a big album. It's got a double page spread, and it's almost as good as putting a print on the wall. Another iPhone page. And then right at the end, we went to Universal Studios for a day, and it was one of the greatest days. I think that's the day. It was one of the greatest days of my life. But we didn't take a camera with us, but, you know, that's like a whole day. I think there might be one or two photos on there that aren't from Universal Studios, but that was a whole day of awesome memories. So of course I'm going to honor that. Like, why would you have if you do a trip to California and you go with your 9-year-old to Universal Studios and you didn't take your camera, like, if you don't put the photos, did it even happen? Like, who's going to remember? So it's got to go in there. So this has now become my format for travel albums. I'm currently working on one from last year when we went to New Zealand. Won't be quite as fat as that, but it was a shorter trip. So this is my planning evolved from that to this. It's a little bit more extensive, but it's the same idea. It's like, here are my years, here are all the books. I mean, this year, 2018 there, look how many offshoots I've got on 2018, like, because that was a big year. That was the year Augie was born.
I love it.
So they're all separate books potentially. And I just started using it to check off, you know, what I've done and what still needed to be done and what I was going to be working on over winter. That's my plan. That's stage 1 of the plan. Stage 2 of the plan is like working out what you're going to do for each type of book. So they're my travel books, and that's, you know, bound in higher quality cover material, and it's a flush mount, and it's expensive. Like, that's expensive. But then there are family annuals, and the family annuals are so massive that I can't do that because A, I don't have enough pages, and B, I couldn't afford it. So the family annual, I've got my first one in print at the moment, and I started with 2017. I think it's a good idea to start with a year that isn't too intense, and also a year that maybe has like lots of little bits and pieces to it. I think this might be a good opportunity for me to jump over to Lightroom to show you how my catalogue is organised.
And while you're jumping over, Katie, I just want to mention...
Oh, you have to enable my screen sharing too, Libby.
Really? Okay. Oh, all panelists. There you go. Does that work? All panelists. Did that work? Yep. I must figure out how to make that automatic. But while you're jumping over there, I was interested to see which books you would start because, you know, as somebody, was it Nicola who mentioned it up here? Somebody mentioned procrastinating.
Oh, yeah.
Nicola. And, you know, which one do I start with? And I get that question a lot. So I often say start with last year because it's the most accessible, it's the easiest, you're most familiar with it. Maybe, you know, you don't have to go back too far in files or find things. It's totally subjective. But
I would actually say, Libby, start with the year before last.
Interesting. Okay.
Because one of the things I found doing this is that it's easier to cull when there's a bit more distance between you and the events.
Good point.
And that's just something I only learnt through doing this first annual. I was like, wow, this is a lot quicker than I expected. And I'm caring less. Yeah. I think I said it in my Sunday somethings. I'll refrain from using too many profanities on this webinar, Libby, but you need to care a little bit less when you're doing
emotional distance.
Yes. You can care a lot when it comes to actually putting the album together and what you choose to put in it. How you choose to lay it out. But the photos that go in it, there's a process, and I'm going to talk you through how I do it, because this is the way I can distance myself and then bring myself back in again. So what you're seeing now is my Lightroom catalogue. I divide everything up by year, and I literally dump folders from specific events into that year, and I label them all. You'll see the file names, starting with the year, then the month, and then the date if the date is applicable, or I just leave no date. The reason I do it like this is because I like to be able to see it in a chronology. I want to see everything from the start of the year through to the end of the year in a column together, because that's how I can find things. So even leaving photo books aside, I just find this is the best way to do it. If you do it differently, it won't work like this in a chronology. So, and it means that you're partly organised. Like I'm partly organised before I come to do the photo books. They're already in the folders and they've got dates on them. They just haven't been culled or sorted. So this year has been, actually. So this is my 2017 one that I actually did. So I had to do a little bit of reorganising when it actually came to the album. But basically the process is I've got my iPhone photos in their own folder. They're always, I just put them all in one folder. And the reason I do that is because I just want to be able to go through them separately after I've culled everything else. And I want to find all the moments that are missed by my real camera or other events. And then it just goes through all of the stuff. And it just, you know, it actually includes, like, this is the year we got married, so it actually includes our wedding photos as well. That I also did our wedding album finally just recently. It includes lots of it includes trips. We went to Tasmania that year. We went to Melbourne. There's a few trips in there, so it was quite a big year. When I look at the number of photos altogether, 10,902. That's including iPhone. It's not over the top. It's not as big as some of my other years, but it's big enough. But I also knew when I flipped through it that it was manageable, and that there were a few things in there that were actually going to go into their own books, so I could literally just ignore those. My culling process, I don't know how many people use Lightroom or use it in this way, but my culling process is always star-based. So I start off with nothing. I go to the top of my folder and I literally just start scrolling through, and I give a 5-star to anything I like. My thinking is if it's got 5 stars, I'm going to keep the photo. It's not going in the album. I'm just going to keep the photo. So you're doing 2 steps of the process by creating a book. First, you're saying what I'm going to keep, which automatically says what I'm not keeping. And then second step is what I'm going to put in my album. So I give a 5-star to everything I like. I literally just flick through. I often do it with 3, with the thumbnails turned up to as the biggest thumbnail arrangement you can do on my screen. I can see 3 in a row. I like looking at it like that because I actually don't want to go through each photo one by one. I don't need to. It's not this stage of culling. It's not actually important to look at how sharp everything is. I just want moments that I keep. So I give them all 5 stars. And then once I've done that and I've gone through my whole folder, and I literally do it quite quickly. It's gut feeling. There's not too much thought involved. It's not like, I guess I kind of see it a little bit like culling a wedding, but I guess it's more fun because they're my memories. That says a lot about what I think about weddings. Sorry, wedding photographers. Everyone knows culling is the hardest part of everything. So once I've done that and I've got my 5 stars, then I go back, I highlight my 5 stars down the bottom so I can only see the 5-starred photos. And then I use the yellow tag, which I think is 7. I use the yellow tag 7 key to select what I would put in the album. Now, just because I've yellowed it doesn't mean it's actually going in the album. It just means that I think I'd like to put it in the album. So I've narrowed my selection down. And I guess this is similar to what you might do with work, you know, with weddings and portraits. It's similar to what we do. I based my approach on what I do for my clients. Now, I also process, edit, you know, add presets, whatever, to everything that's been 5-starred. The reason I do that is because then it's done. The photos are done. They never have to be touched again. And that's like a double, it's 2 birds, 1 stone, is that the phrase? I'm creating an album, but I'm also making sure that that folder of photos is done and I do not have to do any more work on it ever again. And that's the ultimate feeling of satisfaction, because you don't want to just like, oh, I've done my album, but oh, now I've still got to bloody sort the photos, because not everything can go in the album. So yellow everything that I'm going to put in the album potentially, and then I might tweak that a little bit further. So I started off with how many photos? 497 photos, for example, in this family camping trip, most of which were pretty shit, to be honest. And then I went down to 193 5 stars, and then I went down to 72 yellow. Now, there's no way I put 72 photos in there. So I'm going to jump over to, actually, I'll have to stop sharing screens because I only shared Lightroom. Hang on a sec. Just bear with me. I'm going to jump over to the actual album. Hello. How do I do that? Oh, stop share. Sorry, guys.
All right. This happens all the time in Zoom. It's one feature I'm not thrilled with.
Here we go. Okay, share. What can you see?
Can
you see Finder in front?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So this is my PDF that's with Momento. So it's an exported using the Momento software. So you'll see the
preview.
What are those things called?
Watermark.
No,
Printer's guides. Printers.
Oh, crop marks. Crop.
So this is the first part. This is the first chapter of the album. So this is like left side. This is right side. So it's showing you that camping trip that I was just scrolling through, and you can see how I've laid it out and which photos I've used. So definitely not 72 photos. It goes up to there, I think. And there's an iPhone page, 2 iPhone, oh no, just one side iPhone. So that ended up then being my favorite 9 iPhone photos from that particular part of the trip. And then it's the next part of the trip, and then it goes on from there. So when I actually go from Lightroom, I'll export everything into its own folder in the correct color space that I need. So for Momento, that's Adobe RGB. And then I'll jump into InDesign and start laying it out. And in the process of laying it out, I'll lose some more photos because some of them just don't end up being, you know, as special. This is when Jeremy proposed to me in the river while I was sunburnt and had bad BO. It's just so romantic.
So memorable.
Actually, those photos were taken by our friend Mandy. And of course, I'm going to try and get those in there because I actually emailed her to get those photos because otherwise it would have missed that cool moment. I would have still remembered it based on the other stuff in the book, but it kind of just made it whole. So yeah, camping trip. And then it moves on to the next event, which was my best friend's 40th birthday. So this album is... I probably can't open it in Design. I've got a bit of an issue in this particular room, Libby, where I had to come up to this room to do the presentation because of 2-year-old.
Yeah.
But I've got an incompatibility between my two versions of InDesign, so I can't open the file that I created in the other InDesign in this one, so I can't show you the actual layout of that particular album in InDesign. But
given it's a good indication.
Yeah, so I mean, I can go into more detail if anyone has questions about this, by all means, because sometimes I don't want to demonstrate for too long in case it's like, yeah, I know that makes sense. I don't want to bore anybody, but the idea of the putting the family annual together is basically, if I'm going back to Lightroom and I'm seeing all those folders, they are all the events of my year, and I'm just one by one going through each one of those events, and I'm culling it down, 5-star first, yellow second, and then I'm exporting my favorites, getting ready to do the album. And I'm exporting them actually into their own folders within my album folder. And then when I'm ready, which I actually start partway through, I don't do all of it first and then design the album, because it just drives me mental. I cannot do that much culling in one go. So I started and I did like the first 4 or 5 events, and then I started designing, because the designing is the thing that gives me like, oh, so good, this is like so satisfying. And then I'll come back and do a little bit more culling. And so what happens is, in the design process, I start to make some decisions about, you know what, I don't need those photos. They don't actually, this one looks great by itself on this side, and these ones add to the story. And so I don't actually need those other ones. And so I'll start making decisions as I'm going about which ones I'm just going to leave out, because they don't need to be there, because you'll sometimes export way more than what you end up using in the album. So my family annuals, of which I've only done one so far, I'm doing them with about 200 pages in a landscape format, and they're all going to be the same. And I'm going to have the year on the spine, so that when they go on the shelf, I can see which year is which, so that they all look like a set, and I'll just keep building on that. And that was part of my planning. So when I come back to this little thing, I sat down and had a really long conversation with Jeremy about what we were going to do and how we were going to make the travel albums differ from the annuals. And then all of the other projects, they can just be their own. They don't need to fit in with anything. They can be whatever they should be at the time I do that project. Mm-hmm. But those family annuals and the travel albums will have their own kind of thing that they're always going to be, because that makes the bookshelf neater, and it makes my ability to pick what I want off it to look at easier. And it also means that the design process is easier, because you're opening up a template that you've used before. It's so much quicker. Once you've done one, you can just smash through the rest. Like, I know that my second one I do is going to be way quicker than the first one, and so on and so forth. And so this is the just start, and make the template as simple as you possibly can. It does not have to be complicated. So my iPhone pages are they're just grids. And, I tend to shoot iPhone mostly horizontal, so it's easy. They just go in a grid. And my other pages are, really basic grids of, full page bleed, 4 on one side, etc. I can go through some more of that album if you like, so you can see some more pages if anyone wants me to. And I got to the end and I'm like 208 pages in the end, but it's got everything. And it's even got references to my wedding, which is in its own album, and it's got references to our trip to the Northern Territory, which is in its own album. It's got a double page spread saying, because you don't want to say, oh, that didn't happen. Like, if you've got all your dates and events all written through the album, then you don't want to just suddenly not have that thing that you've got its own book for. You want to reference it. So that's great. So you're flicking through 2017 and you're like, oh, and then they went to the Northern Territory and the Whitsundays for a holiday. Cool. Where's that album? Oh, it's there. I'll have a look at that. It's all linked up, and I love it. It's like my thoroughness just coming to life.
You referred to it in your Sunday something as the photo book tree.
Yeah, because it's all linked. You could do a diagram. And when I'm an old lady and I've done all of these and I've literally got like 30 annuals or whatever, however many I've got, I probably won't have 30, but I might have, 20.
Probably will.
Well, the trouble is when you've had 2 children like 11 years apart, it's just like it never ends, because, I have a 2-year-old. Like, I started doing this when my first son was 2. So, here we are going through these early years again. So there will be a lot. And probably when I'm an old lady, I'll actually sit down and draw a beautiful tree of my books. And that will be...
You'll have a lovely time looking through them all too. Now, I've got some questions
yes.
around your use of InDesign. As somebody pointed out, InDesign seems appropriate given your background in graphic design. But David's asking, is InDesign a viable option for someone who has never used that software?
If you have the ability to add it to your software lineup in an inexpensive way and you want to use it for other things, and you've had some experience with other album design software, then yes. But if you'd never used anything like that before and you would only use it for family albums, I wouldn't, because there is great software out there, like Smart Albums and Fundy, which is designed to do this for you. And the principles that I use in my albums are, like in the design, are no different. I'm a very efficient person. I will find the quickest, easiest way to do something, because I don't want to mess around thinking about it for 5 hours. And I will do that if I can't find a solution. So I know myself, and I've been doing it for a long time, so it's easy for me, but I recognize that it's not going to be like that for everyone. But if you think you might use InDesign for other things, it's great. Like, it's an amazing program, and you can design an album super, super, super fast. Like, I put that together in about an hour. I had a template.
I'd like to do a shout out for Momento Pro software at this point too, that if you are going to do because it's so true what Peter said. Katie uses InDesign because that's where she began. She began doing graphic design. You were graphic designer before a photographer. So you actually have skills in that department, and it's a natural fit for you. For those of you because I know that we've got a variety of people here who aren't necessarily professional photographers, but make a lot of photo books. So Momento Pro is perfectly fine for this kind of work. Interesting that with Momento Pro, we say it's a little bit of InDesign, it's a little bit of Photoshop, it's a little bit of Word. So it's a bit of those. You can also create templates in our software if you want to save, like Katie's talking about her mobile shots. She has a specific template she likes to use. You can do that in the software. If you are already using Smart Albums or Fundy or something similar for your portrait or wedding work, then sure, you can use that for this as well. There's a range of tools out there, and I suggest you just use the one you're most comfortable with or you find is most efficient. Louise is asking, are there InDesign templates for the new horizontal albums? For our new portrait albums, yes. We have, so for those of you who may not be aware, yes, we also have InDesign, what we call our InDesign plugin. That means that when you go to start a book, it already has our specs available in the software. And yes, Louise, they are available. The portrait albums are available in our InDesign plugin now too. Does anybody else have any questions about software though while we're on it? Feel free to throw it in there. If they come, I'll let you know.
Yeah, cool. So I'm just looking at my notes to see what I haven't covered.
Sure, and I'll just let you know that it's nearly 15:15, so you're doing just fine, and we can always
that's good. Yeah, I don't think I've got any other big meaty things. Like, I could just talk more about some of the things that I've just covered, because I realise that's all the sort of practical stuff. So I think, if people have questions, this would probably be a really great time, so that I know what more to show you, because I'm quite happy to show you more of the book that I was just talking about, or more of the culling, or more of the organisation part of it. I guess overall, like, you could see it in a number of stages, and it starts with the organising, and the organising is just the folder structure, because that's what you want to look at when you're going into Lightroom to start culling. So get that right first, and then make sure you're not missing anything. Get your iPhone photos in there as well, and then move into the culling and editing phase. And partway through the culling and editing stage, you can jump into some design and then come back again. I just like to do that to break it up, because it's sort of like a wedding. Like, I just don't want to be culling all day long. So
with the culling, Katie, one thing Jeff and I always do when we go on holidays, because like you, we do end up with quite a voluminous amount of images. At the end of each day, we like to transfer our files off the camera or whatever device we've used, and then do the cull every day.
That's awesome.
Because it means it never gets overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a fun way to end the day, you know, and so we try and do that as we go. I'm also aware of other customers of ours who each month, like for an annuals, those who are in the kind of the swing of things and they do their annuals, they will do it on it like at the end of each month, they might kind of file out their content. And maybe that's something people get to, you know, after you've done more annuals and you catch up, you might start doing that annually as well.
Yeah.
So there's just a few other tips.
And also I think the process of starting some of this for anybody, because I know it's changed me, it will probably change some of your habits, because you'll recognize some of the bad ones. And so for me, once I started doing this, I actually became more meticulous about my naming of things and checking that they were all there. And very recently, over autumn, we did a project, which we haven't put into a book yet. And it's a standalone, and I made sure that I culled and processed it as we went, which is what I did with the Dear Toby book, and also with, no, actually I lie, I did not do it with those ones. But yeah, it does make a big difference when you can do it as you go, because then you come back and you're like, oh, so the habits might start changing. And just even coming back to go as far as not taking as many photos, you know, changing that habit. Because I feel as photographers, and I'm talking about myself and some people I know, I'm not saying everybody's like this, because I don't know if everybody is or not, but I know that I quite often take an unnecessary quantity of photos, and being a little more thoughtful about that on my phone and on my real camera, because I know where they're going to end up, actually could be a really good habit to adjust for my future. Yeah.
Hey, we've got a few questions now. So somebody's asked sorry, I should give that person a name. Nicola has asked which type of book and paper you use for your annual.
So eggshell.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Try and keep that one a little less expensive. And that's section sewn still, because I want it to last. I want it to be forever. I'll always do everything section sewn.
And just in case people aren't familiar with what we mean by section sewn, that's where the pages are bound together. They're folded, every 8 pages are folded together, and then they're stitched so that you kind of get the sense of a lay flat. Yeah, Katie can show.
Proper book. But
it's like the way books that you find in a bookstore are bound, rather than what we call side sewn, which is where you take the block of pages and then you just stitch down the left-hand side. So when it opens, it gets a curve in the spine. The section sewn helps keep the pages flatter.
So nice. So nice. It's a proper book.
And my suggestion would be, if you are using like portrait orientation, it's particularly helpful to have section sewing, because, you know, there's not as much weight in the pages to keep the pages flat at the edges. And just on the paper front, so eggshell, if you don't know it, is my personal favorite, other than the cotton rag, of course. But eggshell has a nice texture to it, so it's slightly tactile, and it's a good, if you really love cotton rag, well, to me it's the affordable version of cotton rag.
I totally agree.
That was the cost of the cotton rag.
I think that was the first one I did, and I was really impressed with how nice that is.
It is beautiful, and also very enviro friendly. So you can feel good about that one too. And while you're holding it up, Katie, somebody's asking about the cover. Is that linen or buckram? Black linen?
Linen.
Yes.
Again, it's tactile. I just prefer it so much more. When I did bookbinding, I used some linens and some buckram. So I've actually got that memory, that like the craftsman memory of it. And I really didn't like working with buckram. It was easier to clean as I went with glue and things, but I just didn't like the feeling. It feels plasticky, but it's just a personal preference. I'm a very like textural person. I love knits and linens, and like I just love the feel of things. And I guess personally, I love, like, these are my two favourites. They're quite similar to each other, but one of them's the salt and pepper, and the other one's the biscuit. Is that what it's called?
Biscuit.
Because these have got like a really thick fleck through them,
and a looser weave. Like you can feel more depth in the material.
Yeah. The other ones are still nice. Like they've still got it, but it's just it's a finer texture. Yeah.
Fine black linen. All right, now let's just see. While I search through some of the others, Glennis has asked, what are your thoughts about putting borders around photographs?
I don't really have any thoughts. I'm a pretty minimalist designer. I just like things to be really simple. And with photo books, I feel like it's the photos that are going to do all the work, not anything else that we can add to them. So I prefer a really clean page. But I guess there are reasons why you might put like just a single stroke, around something to signify the edge of the photo, especially if the colour was very light and that same colour as the paper. But otherwise, like, I don't really have much thought on it.
Sorry, so I got distracted by the comments that are coming up in the chat window. So let me come back to, Caesar asks where to find InDesign on our website. So any of the software that you'd like to use to create a book with Momento Pro is available in our design tools section. So if you go to the service menu on our website, on the Momento Pro website, yes, just to be clear, Momento Pro, go to the service menu and there's a section there called Design Tools. In Design Tools, you'll see tiles that go to the Momento Pro software, to Fundy, to Smart Albums, to our InDesign plugin, even to Photoshop templates. So they're all available there. And while I'm talking about it, you can also find our colour management information there and ICC profiles. And I always like to point people in that direction if you're concerned about colour, or if you want the best colour reproduction. The next question is there a thought process / formula to the way you lay out your photos, or is it based on the photos?
There's a template. Like, I've just got a really basic template, which I'm actually just going to share the screen again, because I think, hang on, I think this is, I don't think I spent enough time on it. It's a little bit tricky because I can't open it in InDesign, so I'm sorry about that. Where am I?
While you're opening that up, Katie,
yeah.
I'll answer another question, which is, where can you find good templates to look at while learning? Okay, I suggest on that front, who asked that one? Louise. Yes, so we actually have, on the Momento Pro website, we've got a section called Uses, and in there are different genres of photo books: wedding, portraits, self-published and the like. So you can always go on to each of those pages, and from there we have either videos of actual physical books flicking through the pages where you can see the designs, or we have links to what we call our online flip books, which is basically the online digital version of your book file. So you can see some examples there. I'll also just point out that on the Momento, the consumer website, which of course you guys can have a look at as well, we have an additional section called Best Photo Books, which comes from our Book of the Month competition. You might actually find, for personal book projects, you might find some inspiration there. So that's on Momento. Go to the inspiration panel and Best Photo Books. And then one other reference I'll suggest is, I can't remember actually if it's on our website. maybe what I will do is in an email after this, I can add some links. Oh, I'll do it shortly while Katie's answering some other questions. That's when I'll do it. But we have a page on the website about how to design a photo book, where I've taken information from design experts and just put some examples of pages up there as well. But yeah, just to reiterate, check out the uses section of the Momento Pro website, and also the book of the month, or what we call best photo books, on the Momento website under the inspiration menu. Over to you, Katie.
Can you see are you seeing me flicking through an
Yep,
album?
we can see we can see currently your Finder.
Oh, can you? Oh, all right.
Okay.
We'll try that again. I didn't want to interrupt you. You're on such a roll.
I said what I needed to say.
Where is it? Oh, here we go. Okay, share this. Can you see a beautiful video? That's looking glamorous.
Yeah, now we can see
Great.
the Kolenbergs.
So I was just going to go through more pages from this annual, because you'll see how simple my design aesthetic is. And this is really important, because you don't want to spend too much time thinking this through. Like, you want it to allow, to me, the best album design allows some photos to really speak loudly and other photos to accompany them. And that's why you see so many wedding albums with, a full page lead on one side and then a series of 4 or 6 or whatever on the other side, depending on the format. I love the landscape format, so it's always going to be my preference. And I shoot mostly landscape, so again, that's my preference. So I'll have, pages where there might be 4 on one side and 1 on the other, 2 on one side, 4 on the other. They're all following a grid and they're all lined up perfectly with each other. And I've just created these templates very simply in InDesign. But you can buy templates like this. You can create your own templates. It's all pretty straightforward. And I just feel like that's the best way to have your favorite shots and then have your story. Or your details. I love including details in my photos. And actually, this series that I'm flicking through now, I have contributions from a couple of really close friends who came on this trip with us. And that was awesome, because I got to put their photos in with everybody else's photos. So like, for example, that page back here, there's like 4 of my closest mates, like 2 and 2 portrait style. So those 2 pages are next to each other. It's a really simple layout. There's nothing like complicated about any of this. And I feel like that they're the layouts that make a family album easier to design, but also easier to look through and enjoy.
Absolutely. Less is more, symmetry, white space.
Some full page bleeds. I'm always careful with full page bleeds, because I don't, if the photo has important information around the edge, I don't want to do a full page bleed because I'll lose some of it. If it doesn't, then I can. Like this could have been a full page bleed, but I probably had another one nearby. So I've got this one as a full page bleed. So I didn't want to do 2 in a row. And then and then there's iPhone. These are iPhone photos. So, my coffee is here.
Hey,
no, I don't think anyone can see it because I've got screen share. Oh, you can. Okay.
While Katie's taking a sip, I should also have mentioned that templates, like the designs that you're seeing on these pages here, in the Momento Pro software, there is a panel on the left-hand side called the layout panel, and you will find, these page designs in there too. So either you can drag the template design onto the page and drop your photos in, or have the photos on the page and then go and click on the template you'd like.
Hey, Paul, there's you. Is Paul still watching? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
I saw his name there before. Tasmanian trip. Sorry, Libby.
No, that's all right. I was done. I'm trying to find my...
Who's been to Dark Mofo?
No, not me, but I'd like to.
Oh my God, it was so good. So, like...
Paul's still there.
The thing with the family annual is that you can still have beautiful pages too. They don't just have to be... Like, I wish you could see this one in all its glory as a double page spread, but like 2 portrait photos on each side, it just looks so gorgeous. So you can still be meticulous about your design and, your favorite photos and being artistic if you want to, but it doesn't have to be like that page.
Hey, Katie, you can actually, I'd love you to do this. Go to the view menu page to the layout mode, because this is...
Can I see them next to each other?
Yes, totally. Page display. This is gold.
Two-page view? Oh, no, but it's, hang on.
Wait, 2-page view and 2-page scrolling.
But it's the wrong, it's not the right page with the right page.
Did not show scrolling. There's another option there that is show cover. Go back.
In page display?
Yes, page display. Show cover page in 2-page view.
Perfect. Oh, I wish I'd known that before.
Okay, so this is something, we'd love to be able to set Acrobat to be able to make this the default view when you're looking at your file. But yes, this is, everybody take note of that. If you want to see your pages, 2-page view, and if you do add now in 2-page scrolling, Katie, you can see.
I prefer to just flick through them like this anyway.
Sure. But just so you know, those options are there. And yes, it makes a huge difference when you're looking at your book.
iPhone photos over here on the right. Positive pregnancy test.
Another object.
And an awesome drawing that Toby did of me looking at my phone.
So you look like your mum there.
I do look like my mum, but just mixed in with, you know, other things that are just cool little moments, like, you know, and that can be alongside other beautiful photos. So one of our friends having their baby, and then a trip to Melbourne, and just keeps going. And this is how easy it is. I mean, I'm not saying it was easy to put this together, but in the end, it took me way less time than what I anticipated that it was going to. And like, how awesome that I can have a spread like this in my album, which these photos would have just got chucked away. There's nothing special about them. They were shot in a bowling alley. They're, you know, they're dark and crappy, and my camera didn't do a very good job of capturing the, you know, the dynamic range. But like, how great. Like my 12-year-old who doesn't eat stuffing his face with a hot dog, like, they're just, you can't lose these moments. They need to be in there with everything else.
And you also get more of a sense of the feeling and the excitement and the movement and the energy and in that combination.
Yeah, and you can still have, you know, you can still have your, like this photo on the left taken by Jeremy. I just absolutely love the photo. It's not, we wouldn't put it on the wall because it's one of a million beautiful photos that we've taken, but, well, not a million, but, you know, you guys know what I mean. But it's still got its own page in the book, so we still get to enjoy it for its artisticness. But we also have on the right there, I love this photo of Toby. We were at the Van Gogh exhibition, and he's just like having the not time of his life. And I didn't take any other photos at the Van Gogh exhibition because it was crowded and I wanted to enjoy the art, and Toby was grumpy. But that's my memory from that. And I'm always going to remember how I dragged my, at the time, 9-year-old to this, or 10-year-old to this exhibition that he didn't really like.
Oh, bless him.
So
now, Katie, while you're flicking through there, I'm going to attend to some of these questions that have been.
Keep flicking, and I'll keep talking and answering questions because I know we're almost.
And I'll shout them out. So we've talked about templates. How about the cover? Are we still limited to 19 characters for a title on the cover? Peter, I believe you're referring to our text embossing. Jeff, I'm going to.
On font size and book size.
Okay, yes. And the answer is the number of characters you can have is dependent on the book size and the font size. So you can choose both large text lettering or small text lettering. And off the top of my head, I cannot remember what they are.
60 is
Hold on, Jeff's 60 characters for a small book.
No.
Oh, sorry, for a small text.
And the big font is determined by the width.
And for the big font, it's determined by the width of the book. So where you will find that information, though, is on our website in the photo book, hardcover photo book section. If you go to the options section, and it will tell you what the specs for the text embossing is. It tells you the font that it actually is, the font height, and also the number of characters.
One of the great things about photo covers too is that you can have And this just comes from looking at other books. So you can just have something so simple like that. But then on your first page, then you can put something extra. Like on this one, I just had a subtitle, but there's so much that you can do. Like on the 2017 one, it's just 2017 on the front, but on the inside, I've decided to give each year its own special subtitles. That one's a year of much celebration. And so because that was the year we got married, and so there's a lot of events surrounding that. So that just made sense. And that's something that you can do. You don't need to put that on the front cover as well. So, and you'll also notice I don't do dust jackets. I do like dust jackets, but they get in the way, and when kids are looking through things, they get ripped. So I've always just gone for the linen because it's so simple.
Fair call. I've got a question from Lindy asking about the difference between a flush mount, a lay flat, and where section sewn fits in. Lindy, interesting question. And section sewn doesn't fit in with either flush mount albums or lay flat in this instance.
So you've got your Dear Toby's that you've got there is lay flat.
Good point, thank you. So we're kind of talking different product types. So what Katie has is the creme de la creme, the album, the
flush mount,
and you'll see it is thicker paper, and you actually get two thicknesses. It's a 0.1 mil thickness for the paper. Oh, sorry, 1.1 and a 0.6.
This is the 0.6.
Yeah, and with that, can you just hold it flat, Katie, and let them see what it looks like when it lays flat, like open it up. Yep, and then, so see how this is what we call, this is the flush mount album, but you call that binding butterfly binding. So every page sits perfectly flat. So that's the flush mount album. Normally they're most popular with our wedding and portrait photography customers.
It's only got a little bit of flex in the pages.
Yeah.
Whereas
and that
the other paper is like proper.
That looks like you had a 0.6 mil paper.
Yes, because I used the maximum number of spreads, so I had to.
That's right. So you get different amounts of different page limits for the different paper thicknesses. If you really want to know, we have for the 0.6 mil paper stock, you can go up to the 100 sides. And then with the 1.1 mil, it's 70. Now, with the lay flat, that's what we were looking at here with this Dear Toby book. So we printed ours in a different format to what Katie did, but that's the flexible polymer hinge, and that makes the pages sit pretty flat. This is a thick book, the thicker, as in lots of pages thick, and the thicker the book is, that, you know, sometimes it doesn't sit perfectly flat, but as you can see, it sits flatter than, hold on, I'll get a, Jeffrey, could you grab me a side sewn book? Probably from the showroom might be easier. So we'll show you the side sewn book in a moment. But then that's the same. This is massive. This is like must be about 108 pages. Section sewn, right? Of course. Section sewn, and so that's how that one looks. So the section sewn's got that ability to just really flex. Yeah. That's why I call it a proper book. That's like a proper book that you can. Could you go to just the middle section of one of the sections? So you'll see the stitching in the middle of that section. So yeah, basically every section is bound together, but Lindy, I don't think I did a really great job of describing that, so I will point you towards the our website. Go to the hardcover photo books in the products menu, hardcover photo books, and then there is a section called for binding options, and we've got images and descriptions for each of the binding options. This was the last one I wanted to show you, which was what we call side sewn. So you can literally see here, imagine that the pages have all come out, they're all sitting in one heap, and then we just stitch down the side of the pages. And what that does is you actually end up with a natural curve in the pages. It's the most economical, and you know, really that is the kind of standard print on demand photo book format. Katie has excellent taste, so she's always loved books. I love books, and I want them to feel like real books, and that's what the
the section sewing does. And you can, like, if you use the eggshell, you can get a more affordable book. But like I said, it's worth spending the money on. And this is not a sales pitch. Like, it's just the fact, as far as I'm concerned. It's worth spending the money on because you're going to keep it forever. But the eggshell, for a big book like a family annual, the eggshell is such a great option.
Yeah. And thank you. I feel we've come to the end of the questions here. We've had some people who've had to leave early. Thanks to you, Katie.
That's okay. We've gone over time anyway, so.
Only a little bit. But you'll be pleased to hear from Nicola. She said that this is just what I need to finally get started on my annual books. So you've already inspired somebody. And I think I have covered all questions. If you've got any last minute questions, please throw them in. Katie, it was fabulous. I think that the key points that I took from you were just start was one of them. Be accountable to yourself. And I thought it was interesting, your comment on sharing was your way to keep yourself accountable. And then once you've started this process, like a word that came up a lot for you was consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And that was consistency in the design on the pages, consistency on the with the format of the book, and even in your annual, you chose to make all your images black and white to maintain consistency across the pages. And yeah, planning was the other big thing. And so thank you very much, and for sharing your personal books. They are gorgeous. And somebody has said, on another note entirely, legend Katie, on another note entirely, I'm planning a trip to Iceland, so I would love to hear more about that. So maybe if you stick around for a moment, we can actually talk about that. And Jim says that he's been inspired to start his Iceland photo book 12 months late. That's pretty good,
well,
Jim.
Doing better than me then, Jim, because mine was 2015. But we'll get there.
Yeah, we will. If I make a confession, I've got books that are a lot older than that need to be done. So yes, thank you. I have got to kick up the bum as well. And Paul Llewellyn says he's proud to have made it into one, but he did think he needed a shave.
It was your rugged look.
Rugged good looks. Thank you. So on that note, guys, thank you for joining us. As I mentioned at the start, if you weren't with us, I'll make the recording available in the next few days. Just head back to the events page, and the register now button will have turned into a watch now button, and you'll just need to log in to Momento Pro's website to be able to see it. We'll stick around and talk a little bit of Iceland because that fascinates me too. And in doing a project in landscape photography for my trips, and I'm thinking in printing at least 25 books. Okay, Caesar, I'll talk to you about that maybe offline. If you could email me your details at marketing@Momento Pro, and we'll talk about that separately. Beg your pardon?
Volume service.
Oh, volume service, yes. So Caesar, quick answer is yes, we can do 25 books or more in perfect bound format, no problem. You'll see on our website there is a section for volume orders. You'll find some details there. So thanks, guys. And now back to you, Katie, to talk about Iceland.
Oh, how many people will just wait and see? Let people leave before I start talking about Iceland.
We might have lots of people interested.
Maybe. And
Glenna said she's taken lots of notes.
Yay.
Peter says thank you both. Wonderful. Got a few people disappearing now. Legend Katie.
Who called me a legend?
Who called you a legend? That was Ashley Palombi. Thanks, Ashley. And Katie, we've still got people hanging around. So
yeah, Iceland. What do we want to know about Iceland?
What are the highlights? Where must you go?
It's very photogenic everywhere. So biggest tips would be hire a camper van. Don't pre-book your accommodation. The best tip we got was from an Icelandic friend or acquaintance of mine who no longer lives in Iceland. She lives in Scotland now, but I wrote to her not that long before the trip. We'd already decided to book a camper van because we liked the romanticism of it, of just being able to sort of just go wherever. She said to me, the best advice I can give you for Iceland is have a flexible plan for an itinerary, because if the weather is bad, it's the worst and you shouldn't go there. So she basically said, be prepared to change your plans at a moment's notice and go where the weather is good. And boy, was she right, because when the weather's bad in Iceland, you can't do anything. So you just imagine, so we followed the good weather, and then when we got to the end of our trip was about 3 weeks, and when we got to the end, we had no choice anymore because we still wanted to go to these last few places. So we just went there, and it just turned out that the weather was shit. And so we were at the Jökulsárlón Ice Lagoon, and also a very famous place called Vik, which is on the south of Iceland, not too far from Jökulsárlón. And it was just horrible. It was like freezing cold. By the by, if you dress well, that doesn't really matter. But imagine 2 photographers trying to take photos on this amazing, like, incredible otherworldly landscape, and it's raining so hard. It's like horizontal rain, and you're like, okay, I've got my raincoats and shit, but like I've also got a 70-200, and like I'm trying to take photos, and how am I going to do this? And so that was a bit of a frustrating couple of days when that happened. And if that had have happened, like if we had have just followed our original plan and not adjusted for the weather, that would have happened a lot. Because when Iceland's weather is bad, it's really intense and it can last for like a couple of days. But when it's good, it's amazing.
Yeah, right.
So I would highly recommend going in their summer, because if you're like us, we went just the 2 of us, no kids, and we are high energy people who can literally go all day, and it meant that we could get up at a reasonable time in the morning, have a leisurely breakfast at our campsite, head out by sort of 9ish, and we could literally get probably 12 hours of action, because the sun wouldn't set till midnight. And so we could settle into our next campsite at 10:30 at night, have dinner and go to bed, and then be ready to start the next day. And it just gave us so much. I know a lot of people like to go in winter or in times of year when there's more snow and ice, but like you can still get plenty of snow and ice. I don't really love freezing cold temperatures either, so I wanted it to be at least the same as a Canberra winter, which is what it was like.
I was going to say, but you live in Canberra?
Yeah, but it was like their summer is like Canberra winter. So it's like maybe you might get the occasional day where it's 16, 17 degrees during the day, and then overnight it wasn't as cold. Like it wouldn't go below 0, but it would be cold. It would still be really cold, and the wind would literally go through your bones. So, and when you're camping, sort of camper van style, you really are at the mercy of the elements. So you have this amazing advantage of being able to just go anywhere and do anything and be outside all the time. But then you also have to make sure you protect yourself and try and keep the weather on your side a little bit, because the rain is just so, it's not like Melbourne rain, where it just kind of rains a bit and then it stops and then it rains a bit more. It's not like that. It's like just rains and the wind goes through your bones and it's really intense. So I recommend planning your clothing really well. We did that, and that was great. And making sure you've got a waterproof camera bag cover as well, so that you can walk in the rain if it's only light. Because we did quite a few walks where it was just drizzly or really heavy mist, and we had raincoats and covers for our bags, and it just kept everything safe. And the camper van idea, because that was just the best fun ever. And the season, like it was just so amazing to be able to keep, we were out and just keep exploring at like 10:30 at night.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, just so fun. There was never that need to sort of feel rushed to do anything, because we had so much in every single day, and it was it was like the best. I've traveled to so many places. I'm not saying I'm like as well traveled as some people, but I feel like I'm pretty well traveled, and Iceland just was like next level. Like I can't wait to go back. I don't know when I'm going to be able to go back. It's definitely not a place for toddlers. Do not take your toddler to Iceland.
Okay.
It's not. But kids, like we saw so many people traveling there with school age kids. I think most kids would have an absolute ball. I know Toby, my older son, who's nearly 13, would love it now. It's just the most amazing, mystical, fantastical, beautiful landscape, and you'll take a shit ton of photos. Like, you just won't be able to stop yourself.
So where's the Iceland book in the schedule again?
It probably won't get tackled this year because I'm going to try and backtrack through my annuals first.
Okay.
Because I still have some thoughts on Iceland. It holds such a special place in my heart. I actually don't know if I want to do it in the same format as my other travel books either. So I'm considering what the best option might be. It might have to be something custom. I know you guys love me and my custom orders.
We can work with you on that. We can work with you. I've got a really random question about Iceland. How did you go with pronunciations of everything?
Lan Manalaugar. Not bad.
And that will be spelt in no way like it sounds. I just remember seeing them names come in books, and they're always like, 20 characters long and lots and lots of consonants.
The best thing is just to ask people how things are pronounced, and then you have to get them to repeat it like 5 or 6 times and keep saying it until you get it. I love language, so I try really hard to try and get these things right. But it's hard. It's really hard to pronounce, even though I've got a European background. But you just ask them. Like, Icelandic people are very interesting. It's an interesting culture, but they're very warm and friendly and welcoming. So, yeah. Cool. Although you see more tourists. Oh, another hot tip is I would stay off the ring road as much as possible because it's so busy, and it's where you'll get like tourist buses. Oh, hello.
Is that all?
We finished the official part. I'm being interrupted by Augie.
Hi, Katie.
It's Liddy.
Say hi, Liddy.
Sweetheart. Hello, Augie. Oh, wow, look how much you've grown.
Hi, Mommy.
Hello.
We've been looking at... Oh, sweetheart, hello. We've been looking at your book.
Yeah.
At Augie's book.
Fall asleep. Want to give Mama a kiss?
Oh, wow. Big boy.
He loves looking through the books. He absolutely loves it. He pulls them off the shelf all the time, and I'm like, because he's not very good at turning pages. But he hasn't wrecked any yet. So
Bless. He needs kind of like a lay flat laminated copy just for himself.
He hasn't really gotten into that one yet, but he loves pulling those, probably because it's small. He loves that one.
Yeah.
And he pulls it off a lot and looks through it, mostly because it's lots of photos of him in there. So he loves to point himself out.
Sure.
It's very cute.
The beauty of it.
So, yeah, I know. And actually, the other day I took a little video of him flicking through. So the book I did for my mum for her 70th birthday, I don't know if you saw any sneaky peeks of that when it went through, but my dad came up with this idea and we put together this book of her photos without her knowing about it. It was very sneaky and quite convoluted, but we got there in the end. And my brother's got a copy and I've got a copy and Mum's got a copy. It's printed on cotton rag, and anyway, it's on the shelf. And because it's small as well, like similar to that size, I think Augie he grabs it, but he like pulls it out and he like flicks through the photos. They're all abstract, like architectural streetscapes and stuff, and he comments on what's in the photos, and there's water, there's a puddle, the buildings and the crane, and then he finds the photo of my mum's living room, Omi's room. That's Omi's room. It's very dark, and so he's obsessed with it because it's got things that he recognises in it.
Well, do you know what's interesting about that? One of the comments we make one of the suggestions we make to our consumer audience for alphabet books is to make your own alphabet book, because we've got embellishments in the software that have all the letters and stuff, that use images that children recognise rather than your aardvark and your, animals that they don't understand, because it's there's studies that prove the more recognisable the imagery, the faster they will learn the letters. So we see beautiful, often a lot of grandparents make lettering books for their grandchildren based on photos that they've taken.
That's
And
such a cool idea.
yeah, but I love how it's once again wrapped up in like there's scientific rationale behind that they learn faster with the more recognizable stuff. And it's really interesting that Augie's taken that in approach in a book that's not laid out like an alphabet.
No, and
the
it's
recognition.
Some of the images are quite abstract. There's one in there of like shadows and their seats in a plaza, but it's hard to even tell that they are seats, but he knows that they're seats and he'll say that chairs for sitting on, like when he's pointing to it. So I think it really extends their visual literacy to have exposure to images that aren't what they would normally see at all. Like it's quite amazing to watch children looking at books. Like I love it.
It'll be interesting to see too if I can only imagine that he'll come out with some kind of creative streak.
Hopefully.
Yes, because he's surrounded by artists.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for covering the Iceland.
No worries. I was saying, just let me finish my thought. I was saying about the staying off the ring road, because one of the things people like to see in Iceland is waterfalls. And a lot of the big waterfalls are on the ring road, which is the big road that goes right around the whole of Iceland. And a lot of people just go south and they go down the bottom sort of south section of the ring road and then back again. And a lot of the tourist buses go down there. And yes, there are some beautiful waterfalls, but honestly, unless you are obsessed with waterfalls, like obsessed, and you have to take photographs of all of them, they're just waterfalls. And like, there are so many more amazing places in Iceland, and you'll see waterfalls in other places too, because they're everywhere. So the waterfalls on the ring road have a reputation of being amazing, and like, I'm not saying that they're not, they're really cool, but when you go there, there'll be like 5 buses and hundreds of people. And when you go to some of the off the beaten track places, like the West Fjords, highly recommend going there. Only something like 5% of tourists to Iceland go to the West Fjords. So you can imagine how quiet the roads are and the campgrounds and all the attractions in that area, because it's such a tiny amount of tourists that go there. And that's because the roads are really long and windy and go on forever, but it's so, so beautiful. You can't go wrong in Iceland. Nowhere that you go is going to be ugly or boring.
I'll be going. Okay. And I have one last question.
Mm-hmm.
You also got a thanks, excellent talk and great info about Iceland, and that was from Lindy.
Welcome.
Hey, Katie, Boyhood, that film, is that the film that is filmed in real time, as in the character's age? I can't remember the director's name, but I've always heard about it.
Linklater.
Yeah, Linklater. Ah, okay. You've just reminded me. Well, I definitely have to go in and watch it then.
Yeah, I have an amazing book that my dear friend gave me for my birthday a couple of years ago, which has actually got photographs of all the actors in it taken over the same period of time that the book was made in. The amazing thing about that film is I've only seen it twice so far, and I'm not I don't actually like watching movies a lot. Like, I like the impact of a movie and then I remember it forever, and I very rarely watch movies more than once.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. My mum thinks I'm really weird. But Boyhood I've watched twice so far, and the second time I watched it was about maybe 2 years ago, and it was a completely different experience. So one of the things the movie's about is how memories change with time, and how you almost like play it back, like you restage it. Actually, can I read you something?
Yeah.
I was going to read this at the start, but I got rambly.
I loved that comment. I remember that comment you made in your Sunday. Something's about, we all evolve, and we we have a different reading of the same things because we've changed.
Yeah, that's right. So I wanted the movie to seem, this is from Richard Linklater, I wanted the movie to seem like the memory of a young life, just rolling through time. The best analogy of how memory works that I've ever read is that it's closer to a theatrical production than a movie or video. Instead of pushing the rewind and play button or watching that exact piece of film again, you're actually restaging the event in your mind based on your recollection of the last time you conjured that particular memory. Wow. Maybe over time you've recast the parts a little or given it a slightly different setting. Inevitably, there might be a few new elements glommed on to it based on the circumstances and what else you were recalling from your last production of that particular memory. I find it a beautifully unnerving thought that this story in all our heads, this narrative of our lives that we find ourselves cast in and playing until we can't any longer, He's more imaginative than technically real. And like being pulled into a movie, we have no choice but to accept it as the only reality we know in the moment.
Wow. Beautiful. Totally beautiful.
When I saw the movie the second time, I actually had the thought of, have I seen this movie before? What the? Like, it felt like I was watching a different film. And I don't know if this is just me, and maybe I was in a weird state of mind, but it made it so much more magic for me because when I watched it the first time, I was just transfixed, and I remember bawling, and I remember being like profoundly moved, and like the concepts of time and memory and growing up and everything, it was just so vivid. And then when I saw it the second time, I was looking at it from a different perspective. I think it might have been maybe just after Augie was born, or so I was in a different headspace completely, and I saw it differently. And it's very much what I was saying, that we change and grow, therefore our memories change with us, and our recollections of those memories change. You know, we're selective. The human mind is very cunning. And so when I watched the movie the second time, it felt like different things jumped out at me that I didn't even remember from the first time I saw it. And it feels like a magical film. Like
maybe that's exactly what he wanted. Like, it's particularly appropriate that you say you felt that way with that film.
I know. And I don't know if other people feel the same way. I have a couple of friends who are a bit obsessed with it too, but they have experienced it slightly differently. And I haven't had that assessment later conversation with them, but I'm really curious to know if that's a general thing, or
I'll be watching it this weekend. It's on my list, and just a really kind of, I suppose, left field to what you were just saying. And I know people are still online there, so I'm sure
thanks for still listening to our ramblings.
Yeah. I've had the good fortune in the last week or so, because we're so busy, I'm now doing cameos back down in production, which I have not done for 10 years. They don't let me down there anymore. I love it. But I have been looking at, just lots of different books. But I love so that quite a few people, I mentioned it at the start, quite a few people have been doing like series of books while they've had all this time on their hands. And I'm really surprised at how many men have been doing family books.
Awesome.
Which is really good. So anyway, there were a series of, like, you know, let's say their kids are now maximum, say 13 or 14. This guy had done 3 different kind of periods in their life as they were growing up. And I just happened to QA them all, do the quality assurance on every page, like one after the other. And it was like I was watching this family grow up. And although the design really, really, really wasn't that great, it didn't matter, because I could tell that the dad was just by the way, he'd actually used this misty framed edge on a lot of them. At the end, actually. No, he did all of his pages, and then at the end, he repeated his favourite photos, but with a misty edge around it. And
you're right.
Like he was like recollecting, and these ones just meant so much to him. But it was so beautiful to see, like when you see years of somebody's life in a book, and as a family, even if the book isn't designed well, it was so beautiful. You could see that family grow and their interactions, and the kids were growing up. And I felt like I knew them by the end of the third book.
Yeah, how amazing is that?
So it was really sweet. And Norman's just made a comment on memory. Every time we remember something, we lay down a new memory of it from where we are at that time.
Yes, that's right.
Hence, memories change as they are recalled.
Yeah,
so true. And I thought your point at the start, Katie, about like, do you remember some of those things from your childhood because you remember them, or because you have a photo that triggers the memory of them?
Yes.
Because I know for me, my sister and I and my dad were all blessed with very good memories, long-term memories, and stories could tell you details. But then there's some like photos that we have that I can't remember the actual moment, but I was obviously there.
Yeah.
But they are triggers, and that is just what makes me upset in advance for people who are from this generation and the last generation and the next one, where they may truly end up with no visual memories if they don't print out.
And yet we take more photos than any generation ever.
The irony.
Yeah.
Anyway, you have inspired some of us today, probably.
Yay.
And I think on that note, I could keep chatting all day about this. But thank you again, and thanks to you guys for hanging around. Yep, we loved it too. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye, Livy.
Bye.